Hi, it's Katrina. There are places on Earth where you are absolutely not welcome. These aren't just your typical no trespassing signs. We are talking ancient fortresses shrouded in legend, scorching gates to the underworld, and entire islands crawling with, well, let's just say you wouldn't want to get bit. Today, I'll be exploring the secrets, the dangers, and maybe even a few things that go bump in the night. Buckle up because we're about to go where very few have ever been able to go, but of course, from the comfort and safety of your own home. Let's get forbidden. The Invincible Island. Janjira Fortress in India is an island stronghold that has never been conquered. Its huge, bulky walls rise out of the ocean with its bastions still intact, just waiting for a siege. This thing is enormous, rising 40 feet above its rocky foundations. It looks like Dragonstone from Game of Thrones. What do you think? The sea surrounding the fort served as an impenetrable moat, making this place impossible to get to. This fortress remained undefeated for centuries. But what is it about the island fortress in the Arabian Sea that makes it so invincible? Let's start with a bit of history. In the 12th century, a group known as the Cities arrived on the coast of India from East Africa. They were a collection of merchants, adventurers, and slaves. As the years went by, their reputation for courage and loyalty made them mercenaries of great renown. The cities grew so powerful that they started establishing their own principalities, armies, and cities. In the 1490s, the cities created the state of Janjira. There was already a small fortress on the island, but it was weak and made of wood. Fishermen had built it, not soldiers of war. At the start of the 1500s, the wooden fortress was replaced with the one that still stands today. Nobody has ever been able to beat this thing. The cities made a crazy amount of money from being mercenaries and pirates. They also transported Hajj pilgrims from Deccan in India to Mecca along the Horn of Africa, making plenty of cash as bodyguards and chauffeurs. The Marathas tried to take Janjira, so did the Mughals and the Portuguese, and don't forget the Dutch and the British. They all failed, every single one of them. This monstrosity of a fortress, complete with algae-covered masonry and 18 rounded bastions, fought off every single invader. The descendants of those original mercenaries occupied the ocean fort until the 1890s. They still owned the island until willingly offering it to India in 1947, when India gained independence. And people still lived in it, residing within the walls until the 1980s. It eventually became too difficult to live on the island, detached from society in the modern world. Nowadays, the fortress is empty. You can still visit, but you'll need to make proper arrangements, hire a guide, pay for a boatman. It's not an easy place to get to, even today. But at least it's not completely off limits like it was for hundreds of years. Plutos Gate, the doorway to hell. There is a place in Turkey so dangerous you are not allowed in, or you might drop dead. It's for your own good. Birds that fly too close to its entrance suffocate with the poisoned air and fall from the sky. This is an actual portal to the underworld. And it's as deadly today as it was 2,000 years ago. To the ancient Greco-Romans, Pluto's Gate was a doorway to Hades. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why. Anyone who walked through the entrance and into the dark cavern suffocated and died. Of course they thought it was a portal to the underworld. These days, there's a perfectly reasonable scientific explanation for the sudden death that occurs in this ancient place. It has to do with vapors rising from the ground. Thermal waters bubble inside the cave, releasing toxic fumes. Scientists examined the gas in 2018, identifying volcanic carbon dioxide in deadly concentrations. But the ancient people didn't know that. They built a massive religious temple and dedicated it to the god Pluto, aka Hades. People from all over came to give praise to the Lord of the underworld. They were in awe of what truly appeared to be the dark gateway leading down into the earth, through solid rock to the realm of the dead. Scientists didn't even know about this place until they found it in 2013. Italian archaeologists followed a thermal spring near the town of Pamukkale until they discovered the crumbling ruin. Ever since, they've been hard at work preserving the site, studying it, and keeping tourists from suffocating to death. It's believed the gate was built around 190 BC by King Eumenes II of Pergamon. The thermal springs that run through the area were a kind of double-edged sword. On one hand, they were used in healing rituals. Sick people and those who suffered from chronic pain would bathe themselves in the thermal waters to feel better. On the other hand, the water could give off fumes that killed people. The particularly volatile area was cordoned off. The temple was built, and a death cult rose in the city. Priests would lead animals into the cave in front of an audience. The audience would gasp as the vapor, invisible to the naked eye, killed the animal, but left the priest untouched. This was likely because the priest was holding their breath, or had gotten used to the fumes and knew where to stand to avoid their noxious kiss. Even when the priest didn't die, they still stumbled out of the cave hallucinating, which also helped them prove their point that they had been close to the underworld. I mean, I would believe them. And now for number 10, but first, it's shout-out time. I want to give a huge thank you to Mac Pike for the generous super thanks. Thanks so much for spending time with us. If you are new here, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and join the Origins Explained family. The Forbidden Secrets of No Man's Land. The Canadian province of British Columbia is home to some of the most beautiful natural places in the world. It's also home to natural places that are forbidden to visit by law. One of those forbidden places is the giant gateway to oblivion that opened up in a natural park and could swallow you whole. In 2019, a monster of a cave was discovered in Wells Gray Provincial Park, near the city of Clearwater. Researchers think it's the largest cave in Canada. The entrance alone is 300 feet long and almost just as wide. It's also about 400 feet deep. It's comparable in size to the Statue of Liberty. Scientists have yet to fully study this anomaly. Check out this photo taken by John Pollock showing an aerial shot of the newly found cavern. Isn't it just massive? You can see what looks like a creek flowing straight into it from the bottom left corner. There could be an entire ecosystem thriving in this cave. Scientists are still struggling to organize a trip into its dark depths. But don't go getting any funny ideas. The cave is considered closed to the public. Trespassers can face a fine of up to $1 million and 1 month in prison. There are other forbidden places in BC's wilderness. One of them is an abandoned mansion hidden in the forest. It's creepy, falling to pieces, and nobody is supposed to even look at it. As the legend goes, a man named Vernon Pick built the mansion as a survival retreat deep in the Cayuge Canyon in 1965. The Cold War loomed over both America and Canada in those days. He wasn't the only person trying to build himself a remote hideaway in case it came down to nuclear war. Vernon installed thick walls that could stop a direct hit from a missile. The windows were bulletproof. The only thing Vernon was worried about were forest fires burning the whole place down. The war never came, and the nukes never fell. Vernon died, and his survival cabin was purchased by a local logging company. Then in 2016, it was sold to a private owner. Vernon's cabin remains slowly decaying in an abandoned chunk of forest, but because it's on private property, you can't even enter the woods to get near the Doomsday Mansion. That time, someone broke into the Queen's bedroom. Buckingham Palace is a major tourist destination and hardly a place forbidden to humans. But there is a forbidden place inside the palace. There is a room that nobody is allowed to enter. It was the Queen's bedroom before her passing. You know, the place she actually slept. There is only one man who managed to get in, and only because he did it illegally in 1982. His name is Michael Fagan. He broke into Buckingham Palace and snuck a peek at the Queen's private chambers. You're not going to believe how he pulled it off. Make no mistake, Buckingham Palace is the official home of the British monarch, and although it sees plenty of visitors, it is still a home. The place where the Queen slept was not on any tourist itinerary. So how did Michael get in 40 years ago? It was a bizarre incident that created one of the biggest security scandals in British history. Michael didn't even plan it. It just, well, happened. It was just short of 7 a.m. on the morning of July 9th, 1982. Michael had been out drinking heavily for the entire night. He was wasted, The sun was coming up, and he found himself outside the fence of Buckingham Palace. What's a drunkard to do on a warm summer morning? Why not hop the fence of the most famous royal family's house? Michael climbed over the fence, scaled up a drain pipe like a cat burglar, and got onto the roof. Once on the roof, he took off his shoes and socks. He found an unlocked window and slipped inside. This was unprecedented. A civilian who had guzzled one too many beers managed to get into the royal palace with a few grunts and groans. Once inside, Michael wandered around the place, not entirely sure what to do. He took a look at King George V's stamp collection, and then he triggered the alarm system twice, by the way. Both times, the police thought it was a glitch and turned the alarms off. Somebody surely got fired over that one. Michael was a little lost, a little disoriented, and probably sobering up very quickly. He opened a door and entered a room. Before him was one of the most luxurious beds that any human being has ever slept in. He walked up to the bed and pulled back the curtains. And that was when he saw the Queen. Queen Elizabeth was lying asleep in her bed, and Michael, oozing beer breath, stood above her. This was like if somebody broke into the president's bedroom while they slept and stood above their bed, breathing like a creepy stalker. The Queen woke up, saw the random guy in her room, and grabbed the phone to call security. The next few seconds were really awkward, especially because security didn't come. The Queen ended up scuttling out of bed and hurrying past Michael. She went out into the hall wearing her nightgown. A security guard did eventually come, and Michael was arrested. When questioned by the police, he said he was in love with the Queen and wanted to meet her. The police also learned that Michael had broken into Buckingham Palace once before. The first time, he slipped in through the open window of a room that belonged to one of the royal housemaids. And get this, the housemaid, Sarah Carter, was in her room reading a book. When she saw Michael enter, she ran out of the room and called for help. By the time security got to Sarah's room, Michael had wandered off to another part of the palace. Security accused Sarah of imagining the incident. Michael spent that first visit wandering the palace unopposed. He sat in several thrones before he got bored and left. He said it was harder to get out than in. It was likely the success of his first break-in that inspired Michael to try it again on that drunken night in July. Morgan Island and the Monkey Menace. There is an island in the United States that is full of monkeys. It's something so crazy that, coming from anyone else, you might not even believe it. This amazing island is just off the coast of Beaufort, South Carolina. Over 4,000 monkeys rampage across 2,000 acres of forbidden territory. Nobody is allowed to step foot on Morgan Island, especially not tourists. What is a colony of monkeys doing living autonomously in the United States? And why doesn't everybody know about this? Maybe you do. Let me know in the comments. It all began in 1979. These were the days when monkeys were used to test everything from makeup to medications. Sad, I know, but that's the reality. India was banning the export of research animals in a big win for wildlife advocates. The US wanted to get a bunch of monkeys before the ban officially went into place. They purchased 1,400 rhesus monkeys and put them on the island. It sounds like something an insane, evil scientist would do. The idea was to make a self-sufficient breeding program of test subjects. The monkeys would keep breeding, and the US would never run out of animals to use in laboratory experiments. I did skip over one part that you might find both interesting and alarming. It's pretty freaky stuff, like something straight from Planet of the Apes. Before the monkeys were brought to Morgan Island, they were at the Caribbean Primate Research Center in Puerto Rico. However, some of the monkeys escaped and spread herpes to the local population. Imagine explaining that you contracted the herpes B virus from an escaped lab monkey to your Tinder date. It was such a disaster that Puerto Rico kicked the monkeys out. South Carolina stepped in and allowed them to take over Morgan Island. These days, the monkeys are alive and well. They breed at a rate of about 750 per year. And although I know it does sound kind of cute, keep in mind 500 monkeys are still taken from the island every year and used as test subjects. This is still happening on a federal level. There's major controversy surrounding the island, its monkeys, and the use of animals as test subjects. They've been used to study vaccines for polio and bioterrorism. You name it, the monkeys are involved. What are your thoughts on this touchy subject? Before you answer, keep this one thing in mind. You absolutely cannot visit the island under any circumstances. It's illegal and protected, totally off limits to civilians. It's also very dangerous because the monkeys are territorial and could literally eat you alive. Nobody wants to be eaten by monkeys. The Mormons' secret vault. You may not know this, but the Mormons have one of the biggest and most secure vaults on the planet. It is officially owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS for short. Nobody except pre-authorized personnel are allowed in. In 1965, the Mormons excavated 600 feet into the side of Little Cottonwood Canyon, creating a secure facility for storing sensitive documents. It's like a bank vault inside a cliff, only there's no money in it. If not money, what do the Mormons keep in there? They store records of their genealogical history. There are said to be 2.4 million rolls of microfilm, equal to about 3 billion pages of family history records. Each year, the vault increases its library of microfilm by about 40,000. The extra crazy part is that you can read everything that's on the microfilms. The church has been digitizing their collection since 1999. They claim that everything that's hidden in their vault is publicly available online through their website. If you want, you can check it out after the video. It's familysearch.org. If everything is available online, what's with the giant vault near Salt Lake City? Why blast holes in the rock to hide microfilm? There's some weird stuff going on here. The Mormons own the largest collection of family history information in the world. In 2014, the Mormon church records were 32 times larger than all the information kept by the U.S. Library of Congress. Why do the Mormons have more info on human genealogy than any other institution? The genealogical history isn't just from people involved in the Mormon church. The LDS claims to have records of more than 12 billion people going back to the 1st century AD. They've been trying to gather information on every single human who has ever lived since the birth of Christianity. There are people whose job is to scrape records from churches, libraries, and government agencies. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, census reports, death registers, wills, probates, everything you can think of is collected and stored inside the vault. There are also financial records, scriptures in every single language known to humankind, and physical temple books that belong to the Mormon Church. The vault itself is indestructible. It has reinforced entrance doors that weigh about 14 tons each. The vault, which is under about 700 feet of solid mountain, is strong enough to resist a nuclear blast. Would you rather get a tour of this secret Mormon vault buried underneath Granite Mountain, or the Vatican's secret archives? Let me know in the comments. Moscow's secret metro. There is believed to be a secret underground network of tunnels twisting beneath the Russian capital of Moscow. This hidden system is known covertly as Metro 2. Not only is it off limits, but nobody's even sure it exists. I'll fill you in on the rumors, and then you can decide for yourself what to believe. Moscow is famous for its metro system. On any visit to the Russian capital, you absolutely must take the subway to see the incredible network of rails. The stations are gorgeous, carved from the rock and vibrantly colorful. The stations are inside huge halls with cavernous ceilings. Some of them even have chandeliers. Can you imagine the New York City subway having chandeliers? But there is something else going on here. Underneath the famous metro is said to be a secondary metro, buried beneath the trains that thousands of people use every day. According to legend, Stalin was the man who commissioned the secret system. He wanted a metro line in place so that he could be evacuated in case Moscow was attacked. There are supposedly 4 lines underneath the city. They connect the Kremlin to the FSB headquarters, the underground town of Remenki, and the private government airport of Vnukovo II. This was how afraid Russian leaders were during the Cold War. With the threat of a nuclear strike, Stalin needed a way to escape. He allegedly had the entire underground system built without a single official public record of it being made. Not even the people of Moscow knew what was happening right under their own feet. Those are the rumors, but what's the reality? Nobody has ever seen Metro 2. The only reason people are even talking about it is because of author Vladimir Gonik. Vladimir published a novel about an underground bunker in Moscow and other subterranean secrets in 1992. In an interview about the book, Vladimir said he'd received sensitive information about the secret world below Moscow. To this day, government officials in Russia have neither confirmed nor denied the existence of Metro 2. However, the US Department of Defense published a report that included a diagram of the underground system. The report makes it feel like Metro 2 exists. Even if it does exist, you wouldn't be allowed inside, that's for sure. The sacred Untouchable Mountain. There is a mountain whose peak has never been touched because it's considered sacred. It's a mountain few people have heard of before, and few have ever climbed. This behemoth stands at a whopping 28,169 feet tall. It's the third tallest peak on the planet. Everybody today knows that Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, but in 1849, nobody knew that. Mount Everest wasn't even called Mount Everest. It was simply known as Peak 12. People assumed that Kangchenjunga was the tallest mountain in the world. The Great Trigonometrical Survey of India set the record straight. In 1856, the three tallest peaks were made official. First is Everest, second is K2, and third is Kangchenjunga. The crazy part is that nobody has ever climbed to the top of all three. The sacred mountain was ascended by mountaineers for the first time in 1955. Joe Brown and George Band led an expedition to just below the summit, where they stopped. The mountaineers had made a promise to King Tashi Namgyal of the Kingdom of Sikkim. This kingdom had held dominion over the eastern Himalayas since 1642. It grew to be a protectorate of Tibet. Then, in the 18th century, the kingdom was invaded by Nepal and Bhutan. When the British colonized India, Sikkim allied with the British, and together they attacked Nepal. The history of the region is like a ping-pong ball going back and forth between powers. As of 1950, Sikkim was officially made a protectorate of India. One of their most sacred places is the peak of Kangchenjunga. It was literally worshipped as God. On the Indian side of the mountain, there is zero climbing allowed. You can climb on the Nepalese side, but just not to the top. The Forbidden Tombs of Japan. Japan is littered with humongous tombs so big and impressive they might just put ancient Egypt to shame. But unlike Egypt, Japan has never allowed anyone to dig up their tombs. To this very day, they remain sealed. No entry allowed. Japan is home to about 160,000 of what they call Kofun burial mounds. The mounds date as far back as the 3rd century AD. Almost all of them are shaped like giant keyholes. There are a few squares and a couple circles, but the vast majority are keyhole-shaped mounds surrounded by watery moats like medieval castles. The best way to appreciate a Kofun burial mound is to see it from above. Looking at aerial photographs of Japan and seeing giant grassy keyholes punctuating the landscape is awe-inspiring. Nowhere else in the world did any civilization create burial mounds quite like this, making Japan entirely unique. Most of them are located around Kansai. The biggest of them all is in Sakai City, Osaka Prefecture. It measures an incredible 1,594 feet long. This behemoth of a grave is called the Daisen Kofun. And trust me, it's impressive. It's believed to be the official mausoleum of Emperor Nintoku, the 16th king to reign over the island, likely between 313 and 399 AD. Legend has it, Nintoku ruled until 109 years old. Most of the Kofun burial mounds have one moat. The Daisen Kofun has 3. The outer path that traces the border of this thing is almost 2 miles long. Just take a look at this aerial view. The Daisen is the bigger one, and you can see there are 3 other smaller Kofun burial mounds nearby. Isn't it striking to see them so green and forested, standing out from the concrete jungle of Sakai City? By sheer volume, the Daisen Kofun is considered the 3rd largest burial mound on the planet. Only 2 beat it for size: the Great Pyramid of Cheops and the Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor, home of the Terracotta Warriors. Nobody has been allowed on the Kofun's property since before 1900. Locals used to collect firewood from the Kofun, but those days are long over. Japan doesn't care if you're a tourist, a scientist, or a member of the imperial family. Everyone is forbidden from entering the mausoleum. City 40, radioactive disaster. City 40, also called Ozersk, is considered one of the most heavily contaminated cities on the planet. It was here that the Soviet nuclear weapons program started. Now it's considered a radioactive graveyard. one where the living dead cling to life. Ozersk can be found in the surprisingly lush forest of Russia's Ural Mountains. But don't go trying to find it. Ozersk is protected by barbed wire fences and guard gates. If you go looking for trouble, you might never be seen again. For decades, nobody even knew the city existed. It didn't appear on any maps. The identities of its 100,000 residents were wiped from all Soviet records. It was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost town. Yet the people who lived within its borders were having a great time. It looked, and still does look, like a classic 1950s small American town. It looks a little too perfect, if I'm being honest, with white picket fences and perfume flowers. Ozersk looks like the kind of place where everyone smiles at you, but are secretly murderers. People still live in Ozersk despite the alarming truth. Their water is contaminated, the food they eat is poisoned, their children are sick. The city and the surrounding forest are about as safe as living in Chernobyl. The city is closed, meaning there is no chance you are getting in. Even though outsiders can't enter, the residents are allowed to leave at any time, but they choose not to. They get married, raise families, and suffer the consequences of nuclear devastation. I'm going to tell you a bit about the history, and then you'll understand why the people refuse to leave. In 1946, the Soviets began building the city in total secrecy. Scientists were transported across the empire to build an atomic bomb. For the first 8 years, nobody was allowed to leave. Nobody was even allowed to write letters to their family in the outside world. Those who thought about leaving ended up vanishing, never to be heard from again. The people of City 40 were constantly told that they were the saviors of the world. Russian propaganda enforced the idea that what they were doing was the key to humanity's future. Even as people started to get sick and die from the effects of radiation exposure, they kept morale by believing they were saving the world. Then, in 1957, the Kishtim disaster unfolded. It was the worst nuclear accident until Chernobyl blew up one of its reactors a couple of decades later. People in the city still believe they are contributing to the saving of humanity. They don't seem to mind being exposed to 5 times as much radiation as the people in Ukraine living near Chernobyl. The local lake has so much radioactive waste in it, the locals call it the Lake of Death. I know I'm using Chernobyl a lot here, but it really is the gold standard of radiation catastrophes. City 40's Lake of Death currently holds more than 2.5 times the amount of radiation that was released in the Chernobyl explosion. Even if you were allowed to visit City 40, would you dare? Barren Island. Did you know there is only one active volcano in India? You'd think such a big country would have at least a couple active volcanoes, but there's only one, and you can't even visit it because it's off limits. Barren Island is situated in the Andaman Sea. It's both a volcano and an island. The volcano sprouts from the center of the island with its caldera climbing more than 1,000 feet up. It's dramatic to look at and not something you would want to get near. The volcano is constantly spewing out ash plumes. Every once in a while, it will spit out a lava flow. The last big eruption was in 1994. Then there was a small but prolonged eruption in 2018 that continued until 2022. Even now, the summit has ongoing heat anomalies. It's most likely not going to erupt again soon, but it's certainly not out of the question. When it comes to visiting Barren Island, it is possible, but very challenging. When the volcano is actively erupting, nobody is allowed near it. I mean, you wouldn't really want to hang out in the shadow of an erupting volcano, would you? It was less than 2 years ago that the volcano started to chill out. Now some visitors can take a boat to the island, but you need a special pass from the Andaman and Nicobar Islands Forest Department. It might be easier to get a visa to visit Russia. The shocking tombs of Koguryo. One of the most incredible tomb complexes in the world is not somewhere you're going to wind up on your next vacation. The tombs date back 2,000 years, but are hidden away in one of the most forbidden zones in the world. In the 1st century BC, the Three Kingdoms period began in northern Korea. Over the next 800 years, an estimated 10,000 tombs were built across the country. They are known today as the tombs of Koguryo. Some of them are little more than stone cairns built using the cobblestones from rivers. Others are enormous, huge square tombs built inside towering pyramids. Some tombs were reserved for a single person, while others were found to contain many chambers and coffins. Hwanggaeto ruled northern Korea until his death in 412 AD. It took more than 1,100 blocks to finish his megalithic burial place. Sadly, it's believed his tomb was pillaged long before modern archaeologists found it. In fact, most of the Goguryeo tombs were stripped of their treasures centuries ago. The tombs aren't technically forbidden. There are no specific rules in place against people visiting them, but the trick is, they are in North Korea. Unless you happen to slip into one of the most isolated and locked down countries on the planet, there is no way you are going to see these tombs. Thanks for watching! Which forbidden place would you like to visit the most? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Be sure to stick around for an older video that you might have missed.
Anthrax Island. In Scotland, there is an island called Grunard, and you can't go there because it was poisoned by the government. The locals call it the Island of Death, or Anthrax Island. It's a forbidden zone and has been for almost 80 years. Back in World War II, this island became a secret biological weapons testing center for the UK government. Authorities won't allow anybody on the island, and it gets no visitors except the occasional kayaker brave enough to brush against its shores. The biological weapons being tested here were anthrax bombs. A team of about 50 scientists worked with locals and brought some sheep and set them up in pens. The military then dropped bombs from bomber planes filled with anthrax spores on the sheep to see how successful the infectious disease could be in a war situation. This was back in 1942. It became clear pretty quickly just how powerful anthrax could be. Within 3 days, the sheep were dead, and the island was uninhabitable. It was actually surprising that the people involved didn't get deathly ill. The final report from this experiment stated that biological weapons such as anthrax bombs can paralyze or render an entire city inhospitable. Governments have had access to city-destroying biological bombs for almost a century. As for the island, it's still considered a no-go zone, although the land is allegedly free from disease. The CocaCola Vault. The CocaCola Vault is one of the most unexpected forbidden places in the world. The reason is, of course, the secret recipe for Coca-Cola. It's considered one of the best-kept secrets in history, and it's stored in the CocaCola Vault, a place just about as secure as Fort Knox. The recipe for Coca-Cola was created by John Pemberton in Atlanta in 1886. He had studied pharmacy and was interested in chemistry. In the American Civil War, he was injured and soon became addicted to morphine. He tried to come up with opium-free painkillers and experimented with different recipes until he came up with his incredible concoction. He marketed it as a medicine that could cure headaches, relieve exhaustion, and calm the nerves. It gave you energy and tasted good, so of course everyone believes there must have been a small amount of cocaine in it. Ever since, competitors have been greedily trying to figure out how to recreate the formula with no success. The myth is that only 2 living people have ever seen the legendary formula with their own eyes. Elon Musk has tweeted that next on his list of purchases is going to be Coca-Cola, so he can put the cocaine back in it. But I digress. So let's look at the vault. It's at the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta, a museum that shows the history and legacy of the company. This place opened in May 2007, and you can taste all kinds of flavors. Have you been there? While most of the facility is an ordinary museum, there is a high-tech vault inside holding the original recipe. The museum even has its own bottling line, so that visitors can get the freshest Coca-Cola in the world. You can actually see the vault at the museum while taking a tour, but there is no way you're getting into it. The only way you can get inside the vault and look at the secret formula is if you spend billions of dollars and buy it yourself. Plymouth. Plymouth is a ghost town on the island of Montserrat, a territory of the United Kingdom in the middle of the West Indies. Settlers built this town in the shadow of the Soufriere Hills volcano, which turned out to be a poor decision. The volcano has been active for a very long time, and in 1995, it became so active that Plymouth had to be evacuated. But it wasn't until 1997 that the residents permanently abandoned the town. Lava bombs and ash flows burned and buried the place, making it inhospitable. For centuries until that point, Plymouth had been the only port of entry to the island. It's still technically the capital of Montserrat, which makes it the only ghost capital of any political territory in the world. There is currently a new capital under construction on the other side of the island, but it's not ready yet. This is a dangerous place to go, and that's why there is the Soufriere Hills Volcano Exclusion Zone. This zone covers the entire southern part of the island. At least 2/3 of it is high risk because of flying rocks and unexpected pyroclastic bursts. Authorities have excluded anyone from entering this area. The entire place is vulnerable to volcanic phenomena, but the exclusion zone in particular is immediately dangerous. The volcano could blow, wiping everyone out. But even in the exclusion zone, a random tremor could cause a giant lava rock to land on your head. The Forbidden Amazon. The uncontacted frontier is an area in the Amazon jungle which straddles the borders of Peru, Brazil, and Bolivia. This area is home to the highest concentration of uncontacted tribes anywhere on the planet. Everywhere miners and loggers haven't destroyed the land, these people are still thriving. Everywhere else, drug traffickers, oil exploration, and that kind of thing have ravaged the land. Officials technically consider the uncontacted frontier a forbidden place. No outsiders allowed. There are at least 6 uncontacted tribes that we know of, but there could be more. We just don't know about them because nobody can go here and ask around. We also know very little about these people. Other than that they have no borders, they continue nomadic traditions which have been going on for centuries, and they are in imminent danger of being wiped out. Their biggest threats are rubber plantations and disease brought to them by greedy outsiders. That's one reason there is such a high concentration of uncontacted tribes here. When the rubber boom happened, invaders murdered or enslaved thousands of these Amazonian tribesmen. The few that remained fled into the deepest part of the Amazon and are now hiding out there. Still, as the industry pushes deeper into the jungle, their days seem numbered. What do these people do out there in the middle of the bush? We don't know very much, but most are nomadic, which means they move around depending on the seasons. When it's raining, they retreat away from the rivers into the deep forest, and when it's dry, they camp along the large stretches of river, where they fish and collect turtle eggs. They also live in traditional communal housing, plant crops in any open parts of the forest they can find, and hunt in moderation. In theory, the government has designated this area a forbidden zone to protect the tribes, but they are constantly under threat. Mount Weather. Mount Weather is a secret government facility that is completely out of bounds and extremely mysterious. Located in Virginia, it covers about 564 acres, and it's the emergency operations backup site for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. We also know that on April 7, 2015, after a major electrical power outage hit the region of Washington, D.C., Mount Weather suddenly became extremely active. The very second the outage threatened the power in D.C., this mysterious facility lit up like a Christmas tree. Because of this, we know for sure the Mount Weather facility is some kind of backup for sensitive operations going on in the nation's capital. What else is happening inside is a total mystery. The official story is that the government uses the facility as a defensive bunker and as part of the planning and preparation for emergencies and catastrophes. But it's also filled with unknown equipment, intelligence technology, and personnel. Declassified government records show that FEMA has operated it since 1979. We also know that in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, emergency response teams whisked top Washington officials away to an underground bunker here. That bunker probably exists to this day. What do you think is happening at Mount Weather we don't know about? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Niihau. Niihau is the most forbidden island in Hawaii. It's one of the most beautiful and unique islands in the world, the place where even the ultra-rich can't even dream of vacationing. It's located 17 miles from the resorts of Kauai on the beach, a single stretch of land that's virtually untouched and will remain that way for the near future. The family that owns the island of Niihau restricted it to the 70 residents and their families who live there permanently. These people only live there because the family, who's owned the island since the year 1864, invited them. It's 69 square miles, has no grocery stores, no plumbing, no cops, and not even any paved roads. The residents live by drinking rainwater, using solar panels, and either hunting or farming. It's an unspoiled ecosystem with some of the most endangered species living there in total peace and harmony. It's paradise on Earth, which is the reason it's forbidden. If anyone else could go and tourists started flocking there, the island would probably be ruined. So who owns this place? In 1810, the people united the island under the rule of the great Kamehameha I. Then, in 1863, the Sinclair family arrived in Honolulu from New Zealand, at which time King Kamehameha IV offered to sell the island to them. Ever since, the island has stayed in the Sinclair family, currently owned by their descendants Bruce and Keith Robinson. And believe it or not, the Sinclair family only paid $10,000 for it. Menwith Hill. Menwith Hill is the alleged secret U.S. military base in Yorkshire, United Kingdom. Unconfirmed reports say that from this forbidden facility, the United States is carrying out surveillance and assassination programs. Officially, Menwith Hill is a Royal Air Force base. It's hugely protected, a massive acreage sitting in the middle of rural North Yorkshire. There are only 10 people here at any given time from the Royal Air Force, and yet there are roughly 1,000 U.S. military personnel here. For every one British person at the base, there are 100 U.S. people. What separates this base from others is its secrecy. You can see the thing from miles away because it has 30 giant white globes spread across its property, looking like huge golf balls. Inside the globes are antennae that link the base to who knows how many satellites circling the globe. And again, who knows what these satellites are doing? Almost certainly gathering information for military, political, and economic use. And the staff allegedly relay directly all of this information to the Pentagon. Simply, Menwith Hill, which isn't even in the US, is the center of the information collection nexus of America. It's the NSA's biggest and most forbidden base, and it's not even on U.S. soil. Ayers Rock. On October 26, 2019, one of the most famous climbs in the world was closed. Ayers Rock, also called Uluru, is a sacred stone in the middle of the Australian outback in the Uluru Kata Tjuta National Park. In October 1985, the government gave the land back to the traditional owners, who immediately pushed the tourists out of their community, but they never closed down Uluru itself, the great red rock rising to greet the sun amidst the red sand of the desert. Not until 2019. Now it's forbidden to climb the sacred stone. You can still visit the rock, but under no circumstance can you climb onto it. While this may not seem like a big deal to the average person, to international climbers and people who know about the rock, it definitely is. At an elevation of 2,831 feet, it was one of the most popular trips to take in Australia, and has been a national monument for many years. The reason climbing on it was so frowned upon goes back to the Aboriginal people of the area. The enormous sandstone formation has been sacred to them for centuries. It's woven into their creation legends, and each crack and fissure represents a story. But for over a century, people were climbing all over it like a jungle gym. Morgan Island. Morgan Island is just off the coast of South Carolina. Some call it Monkey Island since it's home to over 4,000 primates. Some are still used in medical testing. As outrageous as that is to hear, it's true. A landscape that looks like the Planet of the Apes is just a few miles from the coast of South Carolina. But it's not like the Planet of the Apes at all. It would make more sense to call it a monkey farm. It all began in 1979. A brutal wave of the herpes B virus swept through Puerto Rico's monkey population. Researchers shipped a few hundred of these monkeys, rhesus monkeys to be exact, to Morgan Island for research. All these years later, their population has spiked to 4,000, and the birth rate is 750 a year. The reason it's called a monkey farm is that annually, researchers take 500 of these monkeys from their home and use them for medical testing. The federal government protects the entire island, and the only people allowed on it are the researchers who use the monkeys in their experiments. As terrible as it sounds, you might call it a necessary evil. Thanks to the experiments made possible by these monkeys, scientists have made vaccines for polio, AIDS, and even against bioterrorist threats. The Pravka Gate. The Pravka Gate is the highest rock bridge in Europe. The gate stands 52 feet tall, 26 feet wide, and 85 feet long. It's enormous. Located in Bohemian Switzerland in the Czech Republic, it's been a national monument since the 18th century. And even though it looks strong and mighty, it's extremely fragile. And this shocks scientists because it hasn't collapsed under its own weight yet. For this reason, it's forbidden for anyone to walk on it. The Pravka Gate is about 100,000 years old. It formed when the entire area was at the bottom of the sea because of settling sand and erosion. And even though it's called a gate, it doesn't lead anywhere. The biggest sandstone arch in Europe is a natural sandstone color. It's also the most striking thing you can see in the Elbe Sandstone Mountains. It's been out of bounds and forbidden since 1982. And the only way to see it is from a specialized viewpoint. You can still visit the Falcon's Nest Inn nestled in the bridge's shadow, an old hotel built in 1826, but you can't get anywhere near it. Avebury. Avebury is a mysterious stone ring just 20 miles from the much more famous Stonehenge. And yet, even though just about everybody on the planet is familiar with Stonehenge, Avebury is actually larger, older, and far more impressive. Avebury is the largest stone ring on the planet. Those who have visited Avebury say it mystified them more than when they visited Stonehenge. And yet, because of its lack of popularity, it has undergone significantly less research and study. Archaeologists remain confused as to who built it or what exactly it was used for. But we do know a few things. Avebury is quite similar to Stonehenge in that it's a megalithic monument built and altered over several periods of time. In total, the diameter of the stone ring is 1,396 feet. Some of these stones are 20 feet tall, and the site encompasses 28 acres of land. At one time, there were 98 standing stones here, far more than at Stonehenge, but today only 27 remain. Avebury consists of 3 main circles. The 2 inner circles were built first, likely sometime around the year 2600 BC. The larger circle on the outside probably came much later. The big mystery is how the ancient people got all those stones there in the first place. It's the same issue with Stonehenge. The sarsen stones, as they are called, are huge. They had to be carved out of bedrock and then dragged across vast distances. Once at the site, workers then had to lift the 40-ton rocks straight up in order to position them as they appear today. The City of Agartha. There is said to be a mysterious lost city hidden inside the very core of the Earth. We have no scientific proof of this, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But according to legends, there is a paradise beneath our very feet, hidden inside a hollow part of the Earth that's home to giants and great beasts. It's here, in the very place King Kong is supposed to live, where the City of Agartha allegedly stands. The idea of a hollow Earth with a great city inside it is not as old as you might think. In ancient times, people believed the inside of the Earth was the location of the underworld. It wasn't until around the 17th century that scientists came up with the theory for the hollow Earth. It was later disproved, and we know today the Earth is actually filled with liquid magma. But back in 1692, Edmund Halley proposed it was hollow. You might recognize Edmund as the one responsible for identifying Halley's Comet. His ideas of a hollow Earth were based on magnetic readings. He thought the planet was built of several spherical shells that all spun in different directions around a central hollow core. This idea was taken and expanded on by other scientists over the next few centuries, ultimately becoming diluted until wild theories became attached to the concept. The legends of the mysterious and ancient interior city included a myriad of details that seem impossible. There's supposedly a miniature sun inside the planet, which allows plants and animals to thrive. There are trees over 1,000 feet tall, humans twice the size of the ones on the surface, and the legendary city of Agartha, where a supposed race of troglodytes live. The city under Death Valley. Speaking of mysterious underground places, there is said to be yet another underground city that nobody has ever seen. But this one is a whole lot more believable. It's not located deep in the fiery core of the planet, but instead underneath the dry, crusted landscape of Death Valley in California. The city is said to be at least 5,000 years old, abandoned by an unknown race of underground dwellers. The only proof we have goes back to 1931, when a man named Bruce Russell allegedly discovered a complex series of tunnels beneath Death Valley. The discovery was reportedly made completely by accident. Bruce and his colleague Daniel Bovey were sinking a shaft for mining when the soil gave out beneath their feet, and they tumbled into a mysterious cave. They found themselves lost in a catacomb of tunnels leading like roots beneath the very earth. But here's where this tale gets a little suspicious. The pair allegedly discovered the mummified remains of 3 enormous men hidden inside the tunnels. These men were over 9 feet tall and clothed in attire made from dried sheepskin. There was even said to be a small treasure hoard of artifacts that looked as though they came from Egypt. There were hieroglyphics carved into the granite, and this was only at the surface. Bruce and Daniel believed there to be hundreds of miles of tunnels going all across southern Nevada and California. Because of how wild these claims were, no professional archaeologist bothered going into the desert to check it out, and eventually the stories and rumors of this fantastic supposed discovery died down. To make things even stranger, both Bruce and Daniel vanished. Bruce's car was found in a remote area of Death Valley, and he was never seen from again. And after that, Daniel also faded from the public eye. What became of these two men and their alleged discovery? That remains a total mystery. Caves of the Canary Islands. On the island of Gran Canaria is the strange archaeological site of Cenobio de Valerón. The site consists of 350 spaces carved by hand into volcanic rock, high up on the side of the mountain. When Spanish conquistadors first arrived in the 15th century, they had no idea what the strange honeycomb of caverns were used for. It appeared to them as though it may have been some kind of monastery. At first, the Spanish believed Cenobio de Valerón was a series of convent rooms. They thought the indigenous people must have put young noble women inside the caves, having them live alongside priestesses in order to keep their virginity intact until they were eventually married. It was a bizarre conclusion and unusual explanation for them to come up with, especially since the caves had actually been used for storing grain, as a communal granary. Why do you think the Spanish colonizers came up with this oddly specific explanation for the caves? Let me know your theories in the comments. Cleopatra's Tomb. A truly enormous statue of a Greek king was discovered inside the ruins of a temple in ancient Egypt. The statue was missing its head, but was still identified as King Ptolemy IV. He was one of the Greek rulers of Egypt during what is called the Ptolemaic period, which lasted from 332 to 30 BC. His broken statue was found at Taposiris Magna, located 28 miles from Alexandria. Some believe this ancient temple may be the final resting place of both Cleopatra and her lover Mark Antony. According to National Geographic, the statue was not the only amazing relic discovered here. Archaeologists have also found the remains of huge sphinxes guarding the temple, statues dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Isis, and other statues linked to the Ptolemaic rulers. Now here's a quick piece of history. Cleopatra, who was actually Cleopatra VII, was the final queen of Egypt in the Ptolemaic period. She and Mark Antony died after being defeated by Octavian, who went on to become the very first emperor of Rome. But no one has ever been able to find the burial place of Cleopatra. They have also never fully excavated Taposiris Magna and the surrounding area. Considering how much evidence they have found that this was a major temple built around the final days of Cleopatra, it would make sense that her tomb is somewhere nearby. It might even be underneath the ruined temple in an area archaeologists have not been able to find. It's shout-out time! Want to say a big thank you to Jay Highway and Alan McCoy. Love you guys and thanks so much for supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and let me know what topics you'd like to see in future videos. Gyaju Caves. The Gyaju Caves are located in a secluded gorge about 50 miles of Beijing, China. The caves are carved on the face of a steep cliff, occupying a total space of 24.7 acres. That makes this mysterious ancient place the biggest cliff residence ever built in China. In total, you can count 117 caves. So much detail was put into the construction of the caves that experts estimate it took at least 100 people 5 years to complete the project. But just what were the caves used for? They were probably simple rooms where people lived. No two caverns are exactly the same, ranging from 3 feet to 20 feet deep. They were basically something similar to ancient apartments that were carved into the side of the mountain. Some even had windows, lampstands where they could hang lights outside their doors, and archaeologists have also found stoves that they used to cook inside their tiny cave homes. At the very top of the cave city is one major duplex so big it's supported by 4 stone columns. These are to stop the roof of the cavern from crashing in. This duplex or penthouse likely belonged to the chieftain who ruled over the entire city. But here's where things get more mysterious. The ancient cliff dwellings were first found in 1984, and yet their origin remains unknown. Experts believe they were carved between 1,000 and 2,000 years ago. However, further evidence is severely lacking. Mysterious Arkansas. Blowing Cave in Arkansas is supposedly a secret entrance to an underground world. One of the most popular myths surrounding this particular cave is that it leads to an underworld occupied by human-like beings who never see the sun. There is supposedly a hidden crevice deep inside the cave which can transport one into the world of these underground beings. Bruce Allen Walton claimed that as he was exploring Blowing Cave in the 1990s, he met a race of extraordinarily tall people between 7 and 8 feet in height. These mysterious humanoids were living down in the dark underground caves, far from the light on the surface. After Bruce left, he wrote a book called The Underground Empire, all about his exploits. And while this may sound like science fiction, it's not the first time a race of giants has been found underground in North America. Don't forget about the underground giants allegedly living under Death Valley. It could very well be that inside cave systems hidden to modern humans, there are entrances to a vast, almost unbelievable subterranean world of giant mythological beings. Do you wish this were true? Let me know in the comments below. Timgad. Timgad is essentially Africa's Pompeii. 1,500 years after the Roman Empire crumbled, its power can still be seen in surprising places, like here, in a secluded part of Algeria. The founding of Timgad goes back to Emperor Trajan in the year 100. It thrived as a proper Roman city in North Africa before it was sacked by Vandals 300 years later. It was reoccupied briefly by a community of Christians, then sacked by Berbers. By the 7th century, Timgad was completely abandoned. Because it was in such an isolated area of the Algerian desert, it was gradually covered by sand and forgotten. It wasn't discovered again until Scottish explorer James Bruce came across it in 1765. But no excavations began until Algeria came under French rule in the 1880s. Because of the dry climate, the fact that nobody came to destroy the ruins, and that nobody has lived here since the Romans, Timgad is exceptionally well preserved. Much like the volcanic eruption near Pompeii allowed life there to be perfectly frozen in time. Visitors here can walk through the Roman avenues and even step into houses and see where Romans once sat to have their dinner. Quiap. Quiap is a truly massive fortress of a city, also called the Walled City in the Clouds. It was built by the Chachapoyas culture in Peru. They were known as the Warriors of the Clouds, a distinct people who resided in the cloud forests of the Andes, at the very edge of the Amazon rainforest. They weren't as influential as the Inca, but they were unique and were highly advanced. Quiap was built on a limestone ridge 900 feet above sea level. It overlooks a huge swath of the Utcubamba Valley, which would have given the occupiers a major advantage for defense. They could have seen an army coming from miles away, and their high walls would have prevented any kind of siege. It was a hugely impressive structure, established in the 6th century AD, then built continuously for the next 600 years. Archaeologists believe construction continued non-stop to make the walls more and more robust. It was during this time that the southern Huari were expanding their borders, and the Chachapoya needed a stronghold that could never be defeated. Alas, they were beaten by the Inca in the 15th century. We don't know how this happened, but some historical accounts suggest the Chachapoya met the Inca on the battlefield. They were overwhelmed by the Inca forces. Then, without enough people defending the walled city in the clouds, the Inca seized the walled complex, and the battle for Quiap was complete. The Allora Caves. The Allora Caves in India are spread over a distance of 1.2 miles. Cut into the faces of basaltic cliffs, there are 34 caves in total. 12 of these caves are dedicated to Buddhism, which date all the way back to 200 BC. Then, in the middle of the cliffs, are 17 Hindu temples from about 700 years later. Finally, 5 of the temples are dedicated to Jainism, made 1,000 years ago. If you aren't sure what Jainism is, it's a religion still practiced today. It teaches salvation of the soul by perfection through living multiple lives. It also preaches non-harm to all living creatures. This mysterious place is dedicated to 3 separate religions, making it a rare sight anywhere on the planet. Archaeologists generally believe Allora served as a group of monasteries for monks and hermits. Most of the caves were nothing but sleeping cells where the monks could rest. The caves not used for monks as dorms were temples. Some of them are truly massive, having been made by removing over 200,000 tons of solid rock. The Kailasa Cave is by far the most impressive, excavated downwards into the rock, 164 feet deep. It's 100 feet wide at some points and has 4 internal levels. It was also carved with extreme detail. including huge monoliths, vast hallways, doorways, windows, and scenes from Hindu mythology. Among the depictions, there is a great carving of Vishnu transforming into a man-lion to battle a demon. What's great about these temples is that they are still visited by worshippers 2,000 years after they were made. We may not know the names of the builders or every mystery of the caves, but they live on as places of pilgrimage even today. Thanks for watching! Which of these mysterious ancient places would you like to visit? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!